I had multiple people that attended saying like, this is the best thing that we've ever done at Target. We were really successful. And like jobs was such a pivotal aspect of that because we started thinking about it completely differently. So we turned the top line revenue growth around completely. 12 to 18 months after we were really deep into jobs, we were growing at 25+% top line a year.
Hi, I'm Jared Ranieri, a partner at thrv. That's thrv.com. And this is our Jobs to Be Done case study series.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're here with the thrv.com case study, that's thrv.com. And today we're here with Matt Bjornson. Matt is a customer we worked with at Target, where he was the director of product management. Had a great time working with Matt, and I'm excited to share his story and his experience with Jobs to Be Done today. So to start with, Matt, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your role was at Target and what you were working on then?
Yeah, so I was, as you said, I was director of product management. I was responsible for a $500 million business, kind of the gift registry business, which, having babies, getting married, those sorts of things. Had a nice sized team that were really doing some truly omni-channel type work. So it was interesting from that regard where, you had to think about the guests in the store, at home on the app or target.com, et cetera. So, so I've been in product management for a long time, been a product leader for a long time. And doing consulting now.
Great. Yeah, that omni-channel experience, I remember, was one of our early conversations because you were asking about, how can you organize a team around jobs when you have product lines that you need to take care of as well. And so that's really my first question for you. Was that the catalyst for adopting Jobs to Be Done? Or was it something else? What made you think, we need a framework here to really help us perform better?
So there were a few things coalescing that, one, I would say, I was specifically hired to turn around this business. It was a guest that was very important to Target. And over the last 6+ years, really had been seeing decreases in top line. And so that was ultimately a key aspect. We needed to do something different. So I was brought in to really start that process. And for us, jobs was a really critical piece of that. I always wanted to do some work. I've kind of, previous product leader roles had toyed around with it. And I would say the other part of it was really around like just some general dissatisfaction with some of the tooling that product and product designers were using. So, of course, personas are one of those tools, and many organizations use them, but really wasn't helping us focus on really understanding why the guests were hiring Target. And so I would say those were the two big things from my perspective, kind of dissatisfaction with kind of the typical, I would say, agile product management approaches. And then really tasked with a really big turnaround, a really big and important turnaround.
Allocating resources to developing new products is extremely risky because your company is investing money in your product roadmap before you generate revenue and profits. If your actual results from your product roadmap are below your projections, this eventually drains your company of cash, destroys equity value, and ultimately leads to failure. Failed product roadmaps destroy companies. BlackBerry, Britannica, and Kodak all failed in the exact same markets as Apple, Google, and Facebook because they didn't have customer-focused product roadmaps. Jobs to be Done mitigates your roadmap risk by focusing your team on your customers' unmet needs in their job to be done. This leads to accelerated growth and product team success.
So your goal was to drive top line revenue for that division, and to do that, you felt like you needed a better understanding of what the customer was trying to do, and how to increase activity to generate.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so like a typical retailer, they think about selling things, and historically the kind of tribal knowledge or thought processes were, that if you were having a baby or getting married, you're building this list, and you're building this list because you wanted these things. Well, it never got to the point where we were digging into why. What was the why behind that? And so instead of focusing on the list, on the product, it was more really, and jobs was critical for us in making this pivot to think about, well, what's really happening, and understanding why they're hiring us in that moment. And so thinking more drastically about kind of the mindset, what are the problems, what is the progress they're trying to make in that would say like, hey, I should hire Target for this. So, and so looking at a list of things versus like, preparing to bring baby home, those are two radically different things. And, one is very narrowly focused, and the other, the job centric, create a lot of white space for us to innovate and do things differently.
The core idea behind Jobs to be Done is that your customers are not buying your product. They are hiring your product to get a job done. This idea goes back to the 1960s when Professor Theodore Levitt summarized jobs theory by observing that customers don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. This idea is true in any market, including yours. For example, in a consumer market, customers don't want navigation apps like Apple or Google Maps. They want to get to destinations on time. This is the customer's goal. It is a stable job to be done that will not change over time. Your customer's job always remains the same. In a business example, salespeople don't want CRM software. They want to acquire new customers. This is a stable job to be done. In a medical example, patients don't want a syringe, which is a product. They want to obtain a blood sample to diagnose their health. This is a job to be done. Customer jobs have a series of steps that a customer needs to take to get the job done successfully. There are 6 types of steps in a customer job to be done that all follow the same pattern. For example, getting to destinations on time follows the job step pattern. In this example, consumers need to estimate the departure time, travel to the destination, and reset the route as needed. These are job steps. Like all customer jobs, this job is complex. These are 12 of the steps in getting to destinations on time. They all follow the job step pattern. Your team can use quantitative surveys to identify where your customers struggle to get their job done using your competitors' products. Helping your customers overcome their struggle is what causes them to purchase your product. When you have identified the most underserved job step in your customer's job, this is how you create a successful product strategy. A successful strategy identifies the target customer, their job to be done, and the job steps where they struggle the most.
I love that contrast, right? Like I've never woken up in the morning being like, I would like to look at a list of things.
Yeah, exactly.
That's never been important to me in my
Yeah.
life.
And so, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, but that shift caused us to revisit how we looked at our analytics to help us judge, are we being successful? Which ultimately laddered up, right, because we're trying to grow the business ultimately to revenue, but it really made us focus differently about those analytics and how we were understanding and researching, like, what are we doing discovery on, and how do we measure success as well.
And what were the activities that you did as a team to make that shift? So you had the idea jobs could be helpful. How did you get from that idea to actually shifting the way you operated?
Well, I mean, the big thing, Jared, was like, I'd never done that before. And so I'd never, like I said before, I toyed with concepts, different pieces of jobs theory, but it's a lot more than like, it's not a tool per se. It's like a whole tool belt. So whereas Persona or some other agile product management tool, it was much broader. Like I saw hey, this touched so much more than just, hey, I fill out a sheet and create a persona and it gets put on the shelf. And so knowing that there was a much broader tool selection or set of tools, and not having been through that before, really needed a partner that could help us, that has been there and done that, had the expertise, because of the I guess the broadness of the tool set, when to use what and some of those things. So that was a really critical thing, because again, being tasked with turning around a business is a pretty significant goal, and wanted to set us up for success. So I would say a critical aspect of that is working with you and Jay at Thrive.
That's great. That's nice to hear. And I remember what we did together. We had a workshop where I think it was a 3-day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was like a 3.5 day.
Yeah, 3.5 days. That's right. Yeah. We spent a lot of time with a pretty big group, like 40 people, I think, on your team. We did a lot of breakout sessions. They were whiteboarding. We were reviewing concepts. We were getting deep into theory. It was fantastic. And what I'm curious about is, what else did you have to do aside from that workshop, either before to prepare the team for it or after to really implement these ideas that we worked on together?
So, the team was hungry, and, they really smart people, really committed to try to do the right thing. So it wasn't so much like, there was, on my part, there wasn't not a lot of saying, hey, let's go do this. It was, I think Jay had actually come and spoke there was like a digital all hands team meeting, and one of the designers brought Jay in to talk. Mm-hmm. And so meanwhile, we were kind of thinking about, what's our next best investment into things. And then we hear Jay talk about like jobs theory and the kind of the broad tool set that Thrive uses. And so once we saw that, there was, I would say that I didn't have to sell the team at all on that. They were super excited about that. And, you mentioned, Jared, that, there were 40 some odd people there. I think what was really beneficial for us is that it wasn't just the product managers. It wasn't just me and the product managers that went through it. It was our product designers, and the product design managers, It was also our engineers and our engineering managers who also went through this process. And, at the end of the sprint, that, 3.5 days, I had multiple people that attended saying like, this is the best thing that we've ever done at Target. And Target obviously does a large organization, does a lot of training and education. But, that was, the team was super engaged in those activities during those 3.5 days. And so, yeah, I would say that was the critical piece of that, is to doing it cross-functionally, and also getting, their managers involved with that too.
That's great. And it's wonderful to hear that you got such positive feedback. So did that translate to the business impact you were looking for? You had a pretty tall order. Did it work out? Did you achieve your results?
Yeah, we were really successful. And like jobs was such a pivotal aspect of that, because we started thinking about it completely differently. So we turned the top line revenue growth around completely. And I think after, want to say 12 to 18 months after we were really deep into jobs, we were growing at 25+% top line a year.
That's great.
So we saw the impact on the business. We saw in our leading metrics as well. So we saw a significant increase in NPS score. We saw about a 20% increase in NPS over that time frame as well.
Wow.
The teams were happy. They were really focused. They were aligned. There was a whole lot of just excitement around just thinking in this different way. I would say there were other things too that were positive outcomes that are like not necessarily part of the charter of turning registry around, but it got to the point where, our key partners, VP directors of merchandising who started using the jobs terminology. And so that became a huge opportunity for us to work cross-functionally with our partners to say, like, what are the big things that we can kind of lean into along the way? So hugely successful around that. I would say the last kind of and more qualitative and more egocentric maybe feedback is that we noticed that our biggest competitor, who was Amazon, started copying a lot of the things that we were doing. And so, again, the team was super excited about that, to see that rather than being a follower, they were now in a place where they were leading things. So super excited.
That's awesome. I think I remember talking about that during the session because we had this whole conversation about how, Amazon innovated really fast, and what if they had features that you didn't have, and how do you build up the table stakes so quickly when they have so many resources and are releasing so much every day? How do you possibly keep up? And I remember, I think we had like an hour-long conversation about how to lead instead of follow. So instead of focusing on the features they have and you don't, focus on the problems you can solve for your customers that they're not solving today. And that's how you leapfrog. So hearing that worked out it's music to my ears.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think all along the way, like, jobs informed our investment decisions. So it was such a critical aspect with how we worked. And, whether you actually go through and identify those unmet needs and kind of where the competitors land relative to, your company or not. But I think the more and more you can just solely focus on the customer's unmet needs, you're going to be much more successful than trying to play that, column fodder. They got this, we got to do that. We got to, instead of, just copying, leapfrogging. So.
Once your team agrees on a winning product strategy, you can analyze the customer needs in each underserved job step to create breakthrough product ideas that will accelerate your growth. A customer need is an action a customer has to take using a variable required to get a job step done. For example, in the job of getting to destinations on time, the job step of planning the stops has variables including the optimal sequence of stops and the routes to the stops. And customers have to take actions with each of these variables in order to get the job done successfully. Structuring customer needs with actions and variables enables your team to measure the speed and accuracy with which your customers can satisfy their needs using competitive products. For example, determining the optimal sequence of stops in a busy day using Apple or Google Maps is a manual and iterative process for a driver. It is slow because it takes multiple user actions, and because a user would likely have imperfect information, the accuracy of determining the optimal sequence of stops with Apple or Google Maps is low. When your team has identified unmet customer needs and competitor weaknesses, they can generate product ideas that will create customer value. In our example, a solution that syncs with a user's calendar and automatically determines the optimal sequence of stops would be faster and more accurate than either Apple or Google Maps. This is how your team can measure the customer value of feature ideas to put in your product roadmap. Customer value is getting your customer's job done faster and more accurately than your competitors. This is how Jobs to be Done can de-risk your roadmap investment and help your team build a winning product strategy that will accelerate your growth.
You talk about making the investment decisions. So did it change like the artifacts you use, the materials you use, like for the JTBD nerds, like what assets did you use to make that change happen, and how did it change your processes?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think the key part is like, continuing to iterate and learn about where are those unmet needs across the job map is really kind of a critical piece of that puzzle. And so it was less around like, we did do the investment theses and those sorts of things. We had the kind of the standard roadmaps that, are kind of pervasive in the industry. What was different was it was all backed up and focused around those areas where there were unmet needs from the customer. So I would say that's pretty much the difference, and that informed where we researched, where we did discovery, where we built prototypes and kind of interacted with customers to get feedback, whether those were gifters or whether those were people who were having a baby. So those sorts of artifacts, the job maps and those unmet needs and were just really kind of critical and underline everything that we did.
That's super interesting. We talk a lot about a customer focused roadmap. It sounds like you got there, right? Like maybe it was still a Gantt chart, but it was all the feature names were focused on how are you going to drive customer value? What are you going to change about their experience? And I can imagine in retail with the focus on conversion funnels that is often pervasive there, that was a pretty significant shift.
So yeah, it really is. I mean, it was truly more about what are those key needs and where are our deltas. What are things that we want to kind of experiment with to learn or experiment that we had a pretty good understanding that that was an unmet need. But yeah, it was very, everything was under everything was the customer, and specifically the jobs and the job maps. So
And I mean, can you share any of the insights you learned about your customer that you didn't have before?
it's such a foundational shift on how you think about the customer. And it's, part of it's functional jobs, but there's an awful lot of social and emotional jobs, which, I kind of feel we only scratch the surface on. But I think at a higher level, like just that mindset pivot around a list versus what's going on in their life in this
Yeah.
moment is such a foundational thing.
Yeah, that those social emotional jobs can be really powerful. One that I remember going through, having made registries, getting married, having kids, etc., is this feeling where you're like, I want to get the stuff that I think is the right stuff for me to have, but I also am supposed to put things on there
Yes.
that people feel comfortable getting me. And what do they
Yes.
feel comfortable getting me? And what is the right price point? And Target is actually quite good at that because it has that good mix of quality products plus price points that a lot of people can live with comfortably. I think we did hire Target to do at least one of our registries with that social emotional job in mind. Like, you don't want to be perceived as, totally, I don't like, greedy comes to mind, or elitist, but like you need to have things on there that, like, that work for a lot of different people.
Yeah, I mean, and you really do get into like even whether you're thinking about nursing or focusing more on bottle fed, like that is one of those areas where it's there's a lot of anxiety that goes through an expecting mother's mind around that. And so there was all these like related questions, like, do I put nursing bras on the registry, or is that something I buy for myself, or what have you? And, if I put this on my registry, am I going to be judged? Those are all like super real social jobs that I would say are really difficult to deal with. But I don't, that being said, I'm not, we definitely heard about some of that before, but like once we made like an intentional focus around jobs, those emotional and social jobs just, they kind of leapt out at us. Now, that's, like I said, that's one area where I think that we all as a team thought there's a lot of richness where we could kind of pursue. But it's also really challenging to deal with some of those things.
Yeah. And I think it really puts that build a list versus prepare
Yes.
to bring a baby home in relief, because building a list, you're like, that's not that hard. Like, where's the opportunity to innovate in that? And it's like,
exactly.
like make the check boxes appear automatically. It's
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Exactly. But when you look at like prepare for baby, like, it's obvious that a lot of people have a really hard time doing that. That is a super underserved job. There's tons of opportunity for innovation, and it breaks you out of the almost the cocoon or the narrow view of the product focus, right? If you're iterating on a list, there's nowhere to go. Like, lists are pretty good right now. So I just love this example for that reason. It shows why being not product focused can really open up your mind into the new opportunities.
Well, and I think, there were a lot of really interesting things that we talked about. Like, so you talked about metrics, and, typical retailer metrics, conversion rate, optimize that. Well, there was, if you think about like the job of prepare to bring baby home, like, yes, there are certain things that you would hire a target for. There's other things that you wouldn't hire a target for, but like we had to, like, there were all these other things that we had to consider around, where was I thinking? Oh, so things like, actually one of our researchers on our team, or our copy editor, she was a doula. And so like there was this whole discussion around like, do you have a traditional birthing experience or do you have a doula? How might Target help you with that? So there's, to your point on the list, like there's just so many different areas to go. But I lost my train of thought around the analytics. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I mean, I think one of the things you might get to is like measuring like how many things are on the list and how many purchases come off that list doesn't necessarily tell you if the customer is prepared to bring their baby home in the right way. The metrics you need to look at to know if you're driving success are different, and they can be leading indicators of whether or not more people hire you to get that job done, because they'll tell their friends like, oh, I used Target and I felt really prepared. I had what I needed when we got back from the hospital.
Yes. So here's where I was going to go. So thanks for you kind of helped me remember I thought. So I would say before I was brought on, and so as I was getting up to speed, one of the things that, one of the metrics was really around the number of items on a registry. And so we were thinking, hey, more is better, right? If you assume, so one way to grow the business would be hold conversion rate, steady, and get them to put more things on the registry. The other one is improve conversion rate.
Right.
Well, now you throw in a variable where you think about, in certain contexts, in certain life moments, which I didn't mention that under the other outcomes, but I can in a second. But when you think about these life moments, there are typically, there's this, in the jobs language, there's the benefactor or beneficiary and the executor. And, in this life moments, whether it's getting married or having a baby, the executor and the beneficiary is a completely different thought process versus I'm going to have a baby, so I build a list. Well, when we looked at that, so one, we looked at the number of items on a registry, and I had a couple of great data scientists that supported us. One of the things that we quickly found was that there was no correlation to the number of items on a registry and revenue. And the big reason is, when you're having a baby, what we found is that most of the purchases, given a time frame. So if you're just before you've had the baby, there's a lot of gifting that happens. Once you have a baby, you tend to buy the things that you didn't get as a result of your showers and what have you.
Right.
So there's this mix of things you buy for yourself and things that others buy for you. And so when you think about that, like putting the things on the list and conversion rates, and it's so much more nuanced based upon thinking about the executor and beneficiary. And so, and that was really kind of reflective in, and we saw drastic differences between, say, for example, getting married versus having a baby. That were just, I think we scratched the surface on, to be honest, but they immediately allowed us to kind of pivot on how we thought about the business. and the metrics that we need to focus on.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's super interesting because I guess you have, in both cases, the gifter is a beneficiary of giving a gift, but they're also the executor and helping
Yes.
get prepared, right? The
Yep.
higher order job,
Yep.
because they're the ones providing the solution. And what you're noticing, I guess, is that when you're preparing for the baby, if the executor doesn't get the job done, you're just going to finish it off yourself.
Yep.
And so the revenue is going to come through one way or the other.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, and if you look at something very different, like getting married, people don't tend to buy the things off their registry if they don't get them, because there's so many like aspirational new life together type things where, it's, hey, this would be cool to have or exciting, or, we're into camping, so, we're going to throw that on there. But if we don't get it, hey, that's cool. And so
Yeah.
they're like two very different life moments and different relationships between, the gifters and the executors and the beneficiaries. So, which, as a result of our thinking more about jobs theory, we kind of started looking at what are other pivotal, and we call them life moments, where they're just these signature moments. They can be, they could be small things. They don't have to be massive things, but they could be things like, and we had, college and adopting a pet, or even the nuance between adopting a baby versus, having a baby. Like there's all these rich nuances that are different, that if you focus on understanding what those jobs are and the social and emotional aspects of those jobs, it's really different.
Yeah, I think I love the marriage example, because the job you're hiring the registry for has probably changed for a huge segment of the population, because
It has.
it used to be that you didn't live together before marriage, or at least a large number of people didn't. And so the job you were hiring the registry for was prepare to a household together. And so there were a bunch of things that you actually needed. But now more and more people are living together, so that's not the job you're hiring. Your household's already prepared. You got that job done.
You got
and so
it.
you're really hiring the registry for enable people who are coming to enable your guests to feel good about giving you a gift. That's kind of what it's become. And so it's a very different job. Or maybe it's like, have a great time once you're married, not really prepare your household. And so if you shift that, it changes what's going to go on the registry and how you're going to construct it and everything you're using the registry for.
Yeah. And I would say we focus more on baby, but there were some things that, areas that we were investigating within wedding, because we saw the trends, like, people living together, like you mentioned, marrying later. They have a lot of things already that are, that their hobbies or household, etc. But where a lot of it was really going was really around this concept of experiences, which obviously companies like Airbnb are leaning into heavily. But so that kind of insight that, again, we kind of got via jobs was allowed us to do kind of a little partnership with a company called Honey Fund. So, hey, rather than buy us this thing for our household, it was more so about, hey, we're going to go swim with the dolphins in wherever you go do that, Hawaii.
Yeah.
So maybe you can contribute towards that. There was also a huge charity aspect of it. Hey, in lieu of gifts, contribute to these specific charities, which we may be passionate about. So yeah, when you have everything that you need to do to start a household, it's very different. So
Yeah.
again, scratch the surface, but there's a lot of opportunity there. So
love
again,
it.
like maybe Target's competing with Airbnb in some situations as a result of the Honey Fund partnership that we did.
That's really fascinating to think about.
Yes.
So one last question. So what have you learned about making jobs to be done work for a team and getting the most out of it that you think would be helpful for other teams who are thinking about implementing it to know?
I would just say two things, and I think I've talked a little bit about them already. One, maybe three things. One, you need someone to help you, someone who's been there, done that, that can help you with some of the things that you're going to grapple with. Whether that's, focusing on where to do discovery and, research type activities, to like, how do you think differently about some of those artifacts? So rather than a story map, maybe you need a job map, or, maybe your roadmaps take on a different flavor altogether. So, but if you've worked with someone who's been there, done that, they can really kind of, you can benefit from that and have a much easier time getting going with that. The second piece I would say is do it cross-functionally. Don't just do it within the context of like your product managers. Engage. If I could do it all over again, I would have had like the VP of baby merch and her team in with us doing the jobs training. I would have had, the head of baby category marketing in those as well, so that rather than us kind of trying to bring them along, it would be like an objective third party that really understands jobs theory deeply, that can help bring all of us along together. So that would be the second piece. And I think the third piece is I think there are things that you can kind of get going on, but no, it really is a journey, because it's not like one tool. There are multiple facets. And again, I feel like I've scratched the surface of those, but it'll take time to get there. And start using the right tools for the right job, if you will, within the jobs framework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's my goal, is to make it take less time to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll do everything we can on that front. Well, This has been terrific, Matt. I really appreciate you taking the time. Tons of great insights about how you grew that business and used Jobs to be Done to do it. So thanks so much for sharing that. Hopefully everybody can get a lot out of this.
If you're interested in learning how Thrive can help your company, visit us at thrv.com or email me directly at jared@thrive.com. That's JARED@thrv.com. Thanks for listening.